Dear students, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we will talk about the second lesson in Unit 1, which is called Speed of Chemical Reactions or Rate of Chemical Reactions. We have studied in the previous lesson that the chemical reaction is the process in which chemical substance turns into another one. زي ما خدنا مثلا في التhermal decomposition ان انا for example عندنا الكبر hydroxide. When we heat copper hydroxide, it changes into copper oxide and water vapor. So a chemical substance changes into another one. Chemical reactions are differ in the time they take to occur. يعني مش كل الchemical reactions تاخد the same time. For example, عندنا في some reactions take a very short time like the fireworks. Some other reactions are a bit slower, like the reaction of oil and caustic soda to form soup. Some other reactions are the slowest and need several months to occur, such as iron rust. And some reactions may take tens or hundreds of years, like the formation of petroleum oil inside the earth. يبقى احنا دلوقتي نقدر نقول انه not all the chemical reactions take the same time. Let's talk now about what's meant by the speed of chemical reaction. Before studying the speed of chemical reaction, we will see a graph and talk about it to explain what is meant by the speed of chemical reaction. We have a reaction in which nitrogen pentoxide, which is N2O5, breaks down into nitrogen dioxide and oxygen gas. Let's see this graph. In this graph there are three lines. The blue line talks about the concentration of N2O5 and the green line talks about oxygen concentration, and the red line is about the concentration of NO2. We have a relation between the concentration and the time taken for the reaction to happen. Firstly, let's talk about the blue line. The concentration of N2O5 is the maximum or the highest or 100% at the starting of the reaction, while the concentration of both O2 and NO2 is 0, minimum. By passing time, the curve of N2O5 decreases and the curves of O2 and NO2 increases. When we come to the end of the reaction, you will see that there is a maximum concentration from O2 and NO2 and 0 concentration of N2O5. So, by decreasing the concentration of the reactants, the concentration of both the products increase. What is the difference between the line of oxygen and the line of nitrogen dioxide? Those two lines resemble the concentration of both the products, but the products don't have the same concentration. لو بصينا هنا هنلاقي إنه قدام كل 2 molecules من ال NO2 بيطلع عندي في البرودكت half molecule من الأكسجين. عشان كده الكيرف بتاع الأكسجين less than the curve of nitrogen dioxide. What's meant by the speed of chemical reaction? It is the change in the concentration of reactants and resultants or products at a unit time. يعني أنا هبدأ ألاحظ الchanging في الكونسنتريشن اللي هيحصل للرياكتنت أو البرودكت. لو الchanging في الكونسنتريشن بتاع الرياكتنت ده takes small time، معنى كده إنه الرياكشن ده fast reaction، أو بمعنى تاني أو بطريقة تانية لو إحنا in a specific time calculate the change in the concentration of reactants، لو حصل في وقت محدد إنه كان فيه large change في الكونسنتريشن بتاع الرياكتنتس، معنى كده انه الرياكشن ده فاست رياكشن. طيب لو التشينج ده اخد more time او during a specific time التشينج ده كان slow، معنى كده ان انا عندي slow reaction. احنا ممكن كمان نعمل calculation للspeed of chemical reaction practically ازاي؟ by choosing a reaction in which the reactant is colored and the product also colored. وابدا الاحظ او اعمل experiment كده وابدا اشوف الديسابيرنس بتاع reactant color take time قد ايه، والابيرنس بتاع الريزلتنت هو كمان اخد تايم قد ايه. زي الرياكشن ده مثلا عندي صوديوم هيدروكسيد بلس كوبر سلفيت it will produce sodium sulfate and copper hydroxide. الكوبر hydroxide has a blue color. It's a salt solution which has a blue color. And sodium hydroxide is colorless. When sodium hydroxide reacts with copper sulfate, the product will be sodium sulfate, which is colorless solution, and copper hydroxide, which is a blue precipitate. By calculating the time taken to disappear the blue color of copper sulfate and the appearance of the blue precipitate of copper hydroxide, we can calculate the speed of chemical reaction. If this change takes short time, so it is a fast reaction. If this change takes more time, so it's a slow reaction. What are the factors affecting the speed of chemical reaction? We have 4 factors: nature of reactants, concentration of reactants, temperature of reactants, and catalysts. Firstly, we'll talk about the nature of reactants. The nature of reactants including 2 factors. 1, type of bonding in reactants. Number 2, the surface area of the reactants exposed to the reaction. Type. Firstly, we will talk about the type of bonding. We have studied 2 types of bonds. Ionic bond ودي بتتكون دايما between ions، و covalent bond دي بتتكون بين two non-metals عن طريق sharing of electrons. فالايونيك bond produces ionic compounds والcovalent bonds form covalent compounds. الcovalent compound دايما are slow in reacting. When they are in a chemical reaction they takes more time or they are slow. ليه؟ Because they don't break up into ions, the reaction are between molecules. يبقى أنا عندي دايما لما أجي أعمل compare بين الcovalent compound والionic compound هقول إن الcovalent compound are slow while the ionic compound are fast reaction. Makes fast reaction. Why? Because the covalent compound don't break down into ions but they are reacted as a molecules, while the ionic compounds easily break up into ions, so the reaction takes place between the ions. For example, sodium chloride and silver nitrate. Sodium chloride and silver nitrate both are ionic compounds, so the reaction between them occurs between ions. NaCl breaks down into 2 ions, Na positive and Cl negative, and AgNO3 silver nitrate breaks down into 2 ions, which is Ag positive and NO3 negative, and the reaction happens between positive sodium and the negative nitrate, and another compound formed between positive ion of silver and the negative ion of chloride. Number 2, the surface area of reactants exposed to the reaction. Before talking about this, let's talk about particles of sugar and cube of sugar. If we try to dissolve the cube of sugar and the particles of sugar, the same amount from particles of sugar in the same amount of liquid, and count the time for both, we will find that the particles of sugar or the sugar particles dissolves faster than the sugar cube. Why? Let's see. The surface area of reactants exposed to the reaction affect the speed of the chemical reaction. The larger the area exposed to the reaction, the faster the chemical reaction is. Let's see here. Let's say that this is the cube of sugar and this is sugar particles. Here, this particle, only part of it is exposed to the molecules of water. And this particle, part of each particle is exposed to water, while those all particles are not exposed to water at all. While here, the number of particles exposed to the reaction, or the surface area exposed to the reaction, is larger than the surface area here in the cube. طيب في الاكسبيرمنت اللي احنا شفناها دي كان عندنا two pieces، واحدة iron piece وواحدة iron filling or iron powder. The rate of reaction of hydrochloric acid with iron filling is faster than the one piece of iron. Our conclusion from this experiment that the area exposed to the reaction in case of iron filling is bigger than that in case of a piece of iron. طيب احنا نجمع الحاجات اللي قلناها. اول حاجة احنا اتكلمنا عن the speed of chemical reaction، وقلنا ان هو change او rate of change in the concentration of reactants and resultants in a unit time. قلنا ان احنا عندنا factors affecting the speed of chemical reaction. اول فاكتور عندي كان nature of reactants، وقلنا ان nature of reactants ده فيه two factors هما type of bonding، وتاني حاجة كانت surface area. قلنا in case of covalent bond it is a slow reaction، وقلنا ليه، واتكلمنا كمان انه في الايونيك compounds بيبقى عندي fast reaction، وقلنا الريزون كمان. تاني حاجة عندي هي surface area exposed for the reaction، وقلنا by increasing the surface area exposed for the reaction will be faster. خدنا example iron filling والايرون piece of iron، وقلنا انه ال piece of iron reacts slower than the iron filling because the surface area exposed for the reaction in case of iron filling is larger. If we see here reaction بين الايرون وال HCl or the hydrochloric acid produces iron chloride and hydrogen. The amount of evolved oxygen here is more than the amount of evolved oxygen here. So when we use iron filling, so the surface area exposed for the reaction is larger than using a piece of iron. The second factor is the concentration of the reactants. By increasing the concentration of the reactants, the probable collision between the particles or the molecules of reactants increases, as we can see here in this picture. But when we decrease the concentration, as we can see here, the number of probable collision decreased. كل ما number of collisions between the molecules of reactants increase, كل ما speed of chemical reaction or the rate of chemical reaction increases. We have here the burning of cleansing wire in two ways. One of them burning it in atmospheric air and the other burning it in a flask contains oxygen. Here the concentration of oxygen is 100%, while here the amount or the concentration of oxygen is 21% only. So when increasing concentration of oxygen, the rate of chemical reaction increases. Let's make another experiment. by using two tubes. One of them contains diluted hydrochloric acid. Diluted means hydrochloric acid mixed with water, and here concentrated or a pure hydrochloric acid. And in both we put magnesium ribbon. We can see here that amount of evolved hydrogen gas is more than in the diluted tube. So the speed of chemical reaction increases when the concentration of reactants increases. Factor number 3 is the temperature of the reaction. When we increase the temperature of the reaction, also the number of collisions between the molecule increases. يبقى number of collision between the molecules موجودة عندي في two factors هما concentration of reactants والtemperature. By increasing the number of collisions, the rate or the speed of chemical reaction increases. If we need to cook the egg faster, we increase the temperature to increase the speed of chemical reaction, helping in cooking the food. And if we don't put the food in the fridge, it will be spoiled or get rotten, because the rate of chemical reaction made by the bacteria decreases when the temperature is low. Let's see here the two glasses. One of them is filled with cold water and the other filled with hot water, and we add two effervescent tablets, one at each glass, and see what happens. We can see the effervescence in the second glass is faster because the second glass contains hot water and its temperature is higher than the temperature in the first glass. Factor number 4 is catalysts. Let's talk about the factor number 4, which is called catalysts. What is meant by catalysts? Catalysts are substances which speed up the chemical reaction or increasing the speed of chemical reaction without changing in it or being used up. معنى الكلام ده ايه؟ معنى الكلام ده انه when we use a catalyst, it's only when we use a catalyst, the catalyst only increasing the rate of chemical reaction, but the catalyst itself doesn't join in the chemical reaction or being a part of its reactants. يعني الكاتاليست الهدف الوحيد من وجوده هو increasing the rate of chemical reaction. طيب, we have two types of catalysts. Most of the catalysts speed up the chemical reaction, so they are called positive catalysts. But some other catalysts used to slow down or decreasing the speed of chemical reaction, so we can call them a negative catalyst. All the catalysts have some common properties. Firstly, they change the speed of chemical reaction by increasing in case of positive or decreasing in case of negative, but they don't affect its beginning or its end. يعني الكاتاليست مش بيحدد امتى الستارتنج اوف رياكشن وامتى الاندنج. الستارتنج بيتحدد once ان reactants بقت موجوده والاكتيفيشن انرجي for starting the reaction بقت موجوده، وبيحصل ending the reaction once انه one or all the reactants are consumed. يبقى الكاتاليست بس بيعمل changing the speed without affecting starting or ending the reaction. Number 2, no chemical change or decrease in mass occur to the catalyst before or after the reaction. Before starting the reaction, when we measure the mass of the catalyst, for example, it's 20 grams, and after the reaction ends, we will measure the mass also of the catalyst, and it will be also the same mass, 20 grams. So the mass of the catalyst doesn't change because the catalysts are not apart from the chemical reaction. It doesn't enter or join in the chemical reaction. Factor number 3, they are combined to reactants but get separated from them quickly to form the products at the end of the reaction. الكاتاليست كل وظيفته ان هو يعمل combine reactants عشان يحاول يعمل speeding up. but they separated، بيبدأوا يتفصلوا عن الرياكتنس دي عشان once إنه الرياكتنس تبدأ تكون البرودكتس خلاص الكاتاليست دوره خلص، هو بس عمل speeding up. Number 4 they decrease the energy needed for the reaction. If the reaction needs more energy to start, the presence of catalyst will decrease this amount of energy, so it helps the reaction to happens quickly and the reactants turns fastly to the products. Number 5 a small amount of catalyst is often enough to complete the reaction. We don't need to add large amount of catalyst. Very small amount of catalyst will do its role well. Why? Because each particle of the catalyst will make its role thousands of times. تمام؟ واحنا اتفقنا انه الكاتاليست it's not consumed and it's not enter in the reaction. معنى كده انه الكاتاليست بيفضل بكامل الماس بتاعته without any change. يبقى معنى كده انه we don't need to add more amount of the catalyst. Let's see an example for the reaction that happens by the helping of a catalyst. Decomposition of hydrogen peroxide. الاكسبيرمنت دي كنا خدناها in the 6th primary، كنا بنتكلم فيها عن ال preparation of oxygen gas. كنا بنقول ان احنا بنستخدم substance اسمها hydrogen peroxide and adding a catalyst which is called manganese dioxide. احنا هنا عندنا two tubes، واحدة منهم contains only hydrogen peroxide and the other contains hydrogen peroxide with manganese dioxide. هنشوف هنا انه ال amount of oxygen gas evolved increases than this tube. A reaction in both tubes will happen, but in the presence of manganese dioxide the reaction takes less time and it goes faster than in this case. يبقى هنقول إنه المنغنيز dioxide only helps in the increase the speed of chemical reaction by increasing the breaking up of hydrogen peroxide to form water and oxygen. One type of the catalyst is called enzymes. What are the enzymes? They are chemical substances produced by the body of a living organism. يبقى enzymes they are catalysts that are found in the body of living organism. Animal, plant or human. They act as a catalyst that increasing the rate of biological reactions. Biological reactions هي reactions اللي happens inside the body of living organism. زي respiration, burning of food to get energy, photosynthesis process and so on. The human body contains thousands types of enzymes. كل enzyme منهم عنده specific role أو specific function. Each type has a specific function. Without enzymes in our body, man can never breathe, move or digest food. لأن احنا بنقول إن هو بيعمل speeding up the reaction. Without using the catalysts or the enzymes, the reaction takes a very long time. So we can't breathe because we need to burn the food faster to get energy to breathe or to move or even to digest the food. One molecule of the enzyme can do its function million times per minute. ده نفس الكلام اللي كنا بنقوله في الكاتاليست لما كنا بنقول ان احنا we don't need large amount from the catalyst. The reaction happens in the presence of enzyme more rapidly than that without enzyme thousands or millions times. Let's see an example for one of the enzymes. This enzyme is found in sweet potato, which is called oxidase enzyme. الأوكسيديز enzyme بيقوم بنفس الفانكشن بتاعة المنجنيز دايوكسيد، بس الفرق ان الأوكسيديز ده natural catalyst اللي هو enzyme. We put hydrogen peroxide in a jar and we put pieces of sweet potato in this jar. We can see that there are bubbles found. البابلز دي معناها ال evolving of oxygen gas. So oxidase enzyme in potato helps in breaking up of hydrogen peroxide such as manganese dioxide. So oxidase enzyme in sweet potato helps in breaking up of hydrogen peroxide to form oxygen and water, just like manganese dioxide. And now let's talk about a device that is used nowadays in the modern cars. الديفايس ده اسمه catalytic converter. الكارز الفيول بتاعها بيحصل له burning to move the car. البرنينج of fuel ده بيطلع harmful substance. الharmful substance دي بتعمل pollution للاير. احنا محتاجين ان احنا نعمل decreasing للامount of harmful gases دي. فعلشان كده most of the modern cars are equipped with catalytic converter. وده عبارة عن part بتركب في الكار في المودرن cars help in treatment of harmful gases. بيعمل changing للharmful gases ويحولها إلى another substances or another compounds. The catalytic converter composed of ceramic cells, just like the B cells, as we can see. These B cells or these ceramic cells covered with a thin layer of catalytic metal. Catalytic metal ده زي ايه؟ زي البلاتينم or palladium. ودول they are very expensive metals. طيب احنا دلوقتي عندنا ceramic cells، والceramic cells دي بنعمل لها covering بالبلاتينم او البلاديوم، وده هو الاليمنت اللي بيستعمل ككاتاليست عشان يعمل speeding up the rate of chemical reaction، علشان يعمل increasing للامount of converted gases، ويعمل convert الجازز دي into another compound that are not harmful or less harmful than the gases produced from the burning of fuel. The idea of using this converter based on exposing largest part of the surface. احنا عاملينهم بشكل البي cells علشان يبقى عندهم largest surface area، علشان يقدروا يعملوا consuming the large amount of gases. طب احنا ليه عاملينهم بالشكل ده؟ to economize the use of these metals. عاملين large surface area وحاطين thin layer علشان نستخدم الكاتاليتيك metals دي اللي هي البلاتينم والبلاديوم ب very small amount because they are very expensive. طبعا انا كل ما هستعمل expensive materials في الكار كل ما البرايس بتاع الكار نفسه هيزيد. فعلشان كده علشان نقدر نقلل شويه في التكلفه بنستعملهم بشكل البي سيل، بنعمل الكاتاليتيك كونفرتر بشكل البي سيل، بنعمل له كفرنج بفيري ثين لاير من الكاتاليتيك ميتالز دول. يبقى احنا اتفقنا انه الكاتاليتيك كونفرتر ده ديفايس used to treat the harmful gases that are emitted from the car engine. Let's see some uses for sodium bicarbonate in our life. Firstly, you can use sodium bicarbonate for shining metal, such as use it to make any silver tool become luster or shiny again, or by using a wet cloth that emerged in sodium bicarbonate to rub any decorative metal piece made of copper or chrome, and it will return shiny again. In the kitchen, we can add a small amount of sodium bicarbonate in the bottom of the waste basket before putting the bag to prevent the bad odors, as sodium bicarbonate can absorb the bad odors from the waste basket. Also, we can soak the legumes in water and add a small amount of sodium carbonate to help in decreasing the bloating that accompanies eating legumes. legumes دي زي البين، زي البيز، لما بنيجي نعملها soaking before cooking we add sodium bicarbonate. بنحط الصوديوم كربونات ده ليه؟ to decrease the bloating. احنا بعد ما بناكل any type من الليجيومز دي بنحس ببلوتنج، فعلشان نقلل الإحساس ده we use sodium bicarbonate when we soak the legumes. Adding a small amount of sodium bicarbonate in the kitchen sink and pour on it boiling water and notice that the draining of the sink is faster. اعتقد كلنا شفنا الاكسبيرمنتس دي في فيديوز على اليوتيوب، ان احنا لما يبقى عندنا الكيتشن سينك فيها اي مشكله او الدرينج فيها بطيء نحط سمول اماونت من الصوديوم بايكربونات ونحط هوت ووتر. الصوديوم كربونات مع الهوت ووتر بيعملوا كليننج للسينك وبيبدا يزود الدرينج اوف ووتر. The last thing in the garden, when we add sodium bicarbonate without adding any something with it in the places where ants come out, and with time you will notice that the ant disappear. يبقى احنا لما نعمل adding للصوديوم بايكربونات في البليسز اللي احنا عارفين انه الants comes from it, after time we will not see any ant in our garden. By the ending of this part we come to the end of our lesson. Thank you so much and hope to see you again in another lessons. Thank you and goodbye.